One stare at you and shout these words, I don't need you. Maybe you said those words to someone. You know, sometimes at the intersection of pride and anger, we shake our fist and we say, I don't need anybody in my life for nothing. Have you been there? I don't need a show of hands. I think all of us at one time or another just feel like we've been so hurt, so let down. People that we thought we could count on bailed out on us or turned their backs, and we get to the point where it's like, I'm not going down that path again. I'm going to just stick to my own self. But the reality is, the truth is, God hardwired us to be in relationship with each other. We are social creatures. We need each other. He built us and designed us to need relationships, to have community. And so, like it or not, we have to find ways of sticking together. And that's why we live in families, and that's why we have churches, and that's why we have messy relationships sometimes. We need each other. This point was well illustrated in a movie years ago. Tom Hanks was in it. It was Castaway. You remember that movie? If you didn't see it, the cliff notes are he gets deserted on an island. There's nobody there. He's all by himself, and he's lonely. He's there for 4 years, and it's a great film. He transforms, loses a lot of weight, and you recall that one of the things in the movie is there was a co-star. I don't think they were nominated for any kind of an award or anything, but Wilson was his sidekick. He found this volleyball, and he put a little handprint on it, made a face, and then he even took some of the leather and spiked it up to make hair out of it. And so Tom Hanks and Wilson interacted in that movie of Castaway. And when Tom Hanks was going to leave the island, remember he made preparations, he was going to go, and he is talking to Wilson the night before they're leaving. And he says to Wilson, he says, are you afraid? Of course, Wilson doesn't answer. He says, I'm afraid. And then Tom Hanks unfolded this whole thing about how he's feeling, and he's anxious and he's nervous, and he shares all this with Wilson. We have to have someone to take our fears to. Someone that we can bounce ideas off of. We need people, and so that was the point of this movie. It illustrated it really well. Paul needed people. Paul realized that he was a gifted man. He was spirit-filled, but he still needed people. He needed people to care for him. When he got sick, he had Dr. Luke with him. When he couldn't go places, or when he ran out of steam, he had Barnabas and Silas with him. And now, as we turn to Philippians, he says, I've got two important people in my life. I've got Timothy and Epaphroditus. And those are two men that I can count on, and they're dear to me. So let's look at what Paul says. Paul's life taught him that good friends are truly valuable. And so we're going to look at Philippians chapter 2, verses 19 through 30 as we continue our study in the book of Philippians. So we'll start in verse 19. It says, I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. I hope therefore to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. And I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. But I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs. For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore I am all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad, and I may have less anxiety. So then welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him, because he almost died in the work for Christ. He risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give him. In these verses, we see three key ingredients into a friendship from the words of Paul. So we're going to look at these. But first I want you to see a little bit more about who Timothy and Epaphroditus was. I think a little biography of who they are would help. First, what do we know about Timothy? Well, Timothy was perhaps Paul's closest friend. He is mentioned in Paul's writings more than any other person. In fact, they had kind of a father-son relationship. Paul took him under his wing. Paul mentions Timothy in 6 of his letters, and in 2 letters, they are targeted directly to Timothy. And so Paul thought a great deal of Timothy. We know that Timothy was a native of either Lystra or Derbe. And in case you don't know where those are, there's a map. And if you're looking for those cities today, you would find them in modern Turkey. And so it was on Paul's second missionary journey that he encountered Timothy. We know that Timothy had what you would call a mixed marriage. His mom was Jewish and his dad was Greek. We know his mom's name was Eunice. We don't know his dad's name. But we do know his dad had a strong influence on him, because we understand that Timothy was not circumcised until he was a young adult. And so that would be the influence of the dad there. Scripture says that mom and grandmother shared with him the Scriptures as he was a young boy and taught him the Scriptures. Paul shares this in 2 Timothy 1:5. He says, "For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, for I am sure that it is in you as well." And in 2 Timothy 3:14 and 15, he says, "You, however, continue in the things you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the sacred writings." Most people believe that Paul led Timothy into a personal relationship with Christ. He mentioned in 1 Corinthians 4:17, he says, "As my beloved and faithful child in the Lord." And in 1 Timothy 1:2, he says, "As my true child in the faith." So they had a close relationship. Timothy joined Paul as a traveling companion on that second missionary journey. And they were close for the rest of their lives. Timothy was with Paul in Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea. And Timothy was also here in Rome as Paul is writing this letter to the Philippian church. So what do we know about Epaphroditus? Well, we don't know as much as we know about Timothy. What we do know is that he did worship with the people at the church of Philippi. And his name, Epaphroditus, you figure that's not a common name. It means someone who worships Aphrodite. If you're up on your Greek mythology, you're going to recognize that Aphrodite was the goddess of love and beauty. If you're more into your Roman mythology, that would be Venus. And so Aphrodite's parents named him that because either he was a good-looking baby, or they were followers and devotees of Aphrodite's, and so they named their child after her. But somewhere along the line, Epaphroditus didn't worship Aphrodite's. Instead, he became a Christian, and he flourished in the church. He was a strong person in that church that they recognized leadership qualities in. And we can say that because Paul tells us what Epaphroditus was asked to do. First, he was asked to bring a monetary gift gathered by the church to help provide Paul's expenses in prison. And so, you know, in church work, you just don't hand a bag full of money off to anyone. And so, some churches found out the hard way, some people don't need to be in charge of finances. And so, Epaphroditus said, I can take that money and I will bring it to Paul and I will care for his expenses. The other thing he was asked to do is he was asked to stay and minister to Paul as a personal servant and attendant. And again, not every person can do that, but Epaphroditus was the type of person he didn't mind caring for the needs of Paul. And so he was dispatched from Philippi to do that. Now I want you to understand, this was not just a simple task. This was a journey of 800 miles. It would take him about 6 weeks to cover 800 miles. And he's going through some very difficult and rough terrain. There's robbers on the street. He's carrying a good sum of money. And so this was something that you would just not give to anybody as an assignment. And so he was brave. He was secure in what he had to do. And he was determined. And so he made that distance. So Paul's going to tell us 3 things we need to do to be better friends. He uses the word brother, Paul does, 133 times to describe relationships between Christians. And so we can really count on what Paul has to say here. First, truly close friends are rare. Truly close friends are rare. He says this in Philippians 2:20. He says, I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. Paul and Timothy were very close. And he uses the word in Greek of isopsychon. It's only used one time in Scripture, and this is the place it's used. Isopsychon means literally that we are same-souled, that we're like-minded, that we have the same perspective on things. And so Paul's saying that Timothy and I think alike. And I'm not sure if they would complete each other's sentences or not. But he said, he thinks like I think, and if he goes somewhere, he can get the same information that I would get. If I can't make a meeting, I'm going to send him, and he'll represent me. I can trust what he would say is the same stuff that I would say. He's going to act like I would act. Timothy is just like me. Even though they were different in years, they had the same mindset. And so Paul really learned to rely and count on Timothy because of that like-mindedness. This is why Timothy was sent to Thessalonica, why he went to Corinth, why he went to Philippi. Timothy knew that he would represent Paul wherever Paul needed to be. When I was a teenager, I figured out that my brain doesn't work like everyone else's brain. I think differently. I see things differently. I process information differently. I'm quirky. And you may think that's good, but as a teenager, you think, I'm odd. And it's just kind of the way God made me. I see things differently. But it wasn't until 2002 I met someone else who was just as quirky as me. And it was Rick Sykes. Rick processes information the same way I do. He sees things the same way. We come to the same conclusions. Now, we may take different paths getting there, but we see each other the same way. Rick and I worked on a big project in Africa together, rehabbing a hospital in Sinyali, and if we both couldn't go, sending one was just as good as sending both of us, because we just think the same way. And this is what Paul is saying about Timothy. He said, we're one, we're the same minded. In verse 20, he says, I have no one else like him, that we're common in our spirit. And Paul felt about Epaphroditus. He said he's a brother, a fellow worker, a fellow soldier. And in verse 25, he says, "But I think it necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you sent to take care of my needs." Paul's saying, this is a person I can count on. I can ask him to do something, and I know it's going to be done. He's not going to have excuses. He's going to do whatever is necessary. Johnny Erickson Todd, I don't know if you know her story, but as a teenager, she was diving. She dove, hit a rock. She damaged her spinal column, and she was a paraplegic. She couldn't move her arms or her legs. I guess that's a quadriplegic, yeah. We'll go from para to quad. And so she tells a story of when that accident just happened. She's laying in bed, and she's having a panic attack. Her mind is working, and she's trying to get her limbs to move, and nothing's happening. And so she is literally getting kind of claustrophobic in her own body because her body won't respond. And she says that she was just panicky to see her hands. She just wanted to see her hands. And she said that as this anxiety was building up in her friend Jackie had crawled into her hospital room to avoid detection from the nurse's station. She crawled up, popped over the bed, crawled into bed with her, and started lifting up her hands so that she could see her hands. And she started to sing the hymns of our faith. And she prayed with her and calmed her until she was comforted. If you have a bond with some close friends, you don't have to say a word, you just know. And that's the way it was for Johnny and for Jackie. The other thing that Paul says is that true friends are compassionate. True friends are compassionate. In chapter 1, we're talking about how the Roman Christians responded to Paul's imprisonment. They ignored him. Here, Paul, missionary to the world, gone on 3 missionary journeys, traveled around, preached the gospel. Here he is in their own backyard, and they can't even go down and see him. Even the pastors of the Roman churches wouldn't go down and visit Paul, bring him any kind of banana bread or anything. So why couldn't they take time out of their schedule? But they had no compassion on him. They were too self-absorbed, too self-involved with their own needs, their own lives, their own interests. In Philippians 2:21, Paul says, "For everyone looks out for their own interests, not of those of Jesus Christ." And so he says, Timothy and Epaphroditus, they cared for me. They took the time to be compassionate to me. They went out of their way to do so. And you know, you and I, if we're not careful, our crazy, hectic, fast-paced lives can really crowd out any kind of opportunity for us to be compassionate with one another. We get very self-absorbed with what we have to do, and with our own pleasures, our own goals, our own agendas, that we just push everything out aside. There's a story of 2 little kids fighting over a tricycle. One wants it, the other one wants it, and they're pulling it back and forth, and one little kid finally says to the other one, "You know, I'd have a lot better time if you'd just let go." And isn't that the way we are? We'd have a whole lot better time if people would just see things our way. Let me just do it the way I want to do. But we need to have compassion. We need to think about and empathize with other people's problems. William Booth was the founder of the Salvation Army. And he preached a fabulous message. In fact, there was hundreds that responded. The gospel came forward and gave their life to Christ. And his assistant found William Booth in a corner just after preaching that message, and he was just sobbing and weeping. And so he said, "Why are you crying? So many people came to Christ today." And he said, "I'm thinking about the hundreds who didn't." And he was just torn up emotionally about all the people that needed Christ, but yet they hadn't yet responded. We need to be like that. we need to have that kind of compassion in our life. We need to be moved by the things that move Christ. In Proverbs 17:17, it says, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born in adversity. A friend sticks with you, stays compassionate, and cares about you. Tony Campolo used to teach at Eastern College in Philadelphia, and as a part of his program, he would take students down to Haiti or the Dominican Republic, and he would have them care for the people in Haiti and Dominican Republic. And one of the things that that college started was a feeding program for children. And so they would distribute 500 meals twice a day for children. And you would think that the students would probably be scooping out the mac and cheese or whatever they're having for that day. But the job Tony would give them is they would stand at the door and they would count 500 kids. And then they had to stay there until 501 through thousands. Sorry, there's no more food. Think about how that would break your heart. To tell these hungry, starving children, there's no more food. But it was teaching them how to have compassion. And we need to learn to have compassion. Number 3, Paul said that they should be sacrificial in the way they relate to others. Sometimes you and I just don't want to go out of the way for somebody. It's too hard. And if you would think about prisons, and who typically visits prisoners, are probably someone who's on the shady side. Not always, you don't want to stereotype. But it was certainly true in Paul's day. If you were incarcerated in a Roman prison, the only people hanging around Roman prisons were people that were of the criminal type. And so that's why the Christian community in Rome was disassociating itself from the prison that Paul was in. I don't want to look like I'm a bad person, so I'm just going to stay away. And so they wouldn't associate with him. And so Timothy and Epaphroditus were putting themselves in danger just going to the prisons. They were putting a target on their back. Friends who generally love don't shy away from dangerous sacrifice. In John 15:13, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for a friend. Epaphroditus did exactly this when he came to Rome. For when he arrived, he picked up some kind of a bug, some kind of a sickness. We don't know what it was, it doesn't tell us, but it was something that brought him to the point of death. There was a notorious Roman fever that went around. Perhaps he had that. Perhaps he was run down because the long journey that he had, his resistance could have been down. He could have just been worn out. But whatever he had, it was serious because it says he almost died. In verse 30 it says, because he almost died for the work of Christ, he risked his life to make up for the help you yourselves could not give me. The word that is used here that says risked his life, the Greek word is parabolonii. And parabolonii means risking, or it means lay your life on the line or stick your neck out to tread where others fear to tread, or to be willing to sacrifice. It literally means to gamble with one's own life. In fact, in the early church, there was a society of people, of Christians, and they were called the Parabolonii. And it meant that they were risk takers, or the gamblers. And these were the people that cared for those who were hurting, who were sick and dying. And they went to the bad places, and they loved people and cared for them when nobody else would. And they were considered to be the risk takers. You know, there's a special bond that close friends have. And when you have a friend like that, and they say, you know, I hate to ask this of you, this is going to be hard, and they don't say, well, You know, I need to know the risk beforehand. What's this going to cost me? How much time? What's this going to involve? They just say, what do you need? When do you need me there? What do you need me to do? That's a sacrificial friend. In Proverbs 27:6, it says, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Solomon is saying that even when a friend says difficult things, you can still trust it because they care for you. But an enemy's just going to kiss, 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 and tell you what you want to hear. Friends tell each other the truth, even when the truth hurts. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, I don't have anybody in my life like that. I don't have those kind of friends. I don't have those kind of people. Maybe at one time you had someone like that, and they turned out they weren't those kind of friends. Let me tell you right now, if you don't think you have a person like that in your life, you do. It's Jesus. Jesus is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. He knows you. He knows where you're hurt. He knows where you struggle. He knows what you need. In fact, he died on the cross for those needs. And so you can't sit here and say, I'm alone. I don't need anybody. I'm all by myself. It's not true. As we move into invitation, I want to ask you to do three things. One is if you've never allowed Jesus Christ to be that kind of friend for you, I encourage you to do it today. Two, if you have a person who's been a friend like that in your life, you need to figure out how to thank them. Maybe a phone call, maybe an email, maybe a Facebook message. Maybe they're not in this world anymore. You need to just thank God for that person that was in your life. But here's the third thing. Who are you a friend like that to? Who are you being close to? Who are you being real with? Who are you being compassionate to? Who are you being sacrificial for? Who can call you at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I need help? Who's that person? And who are you that person for someone else? The Bible says they will know you're a Christian by your love. Would you stand as we sing?